And I will introduce our authors for tonight formally. So we are here with Gina Barreca, the author of 10 books, including the best-selling They Used to Call Me Snow White, But I Drifted, Babes in Boyland, A Personal History of Co-Education in the Ivy League, Sweet Revenge, The Wicked Delights of Getting Even, and It's Not That I'm Bitter, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying About Visible Panty Lines and Conquered the World. Translated into several languages, including Chinese, Japanese, Spanish, German, and Portuguese. She has also edited 17 collections, including the Penguin Book of Women's Humor and the Signet Book of American Humor. Board of Trustees, Distinguished Professor of English Literature at the University of Connecticut, Gina has regularly written for the New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, Cosmopolitan, Miss, and the Chronicle of Education. Deemed a feminist humor maven by Miss and called smart and funny by People magazine, Gina has appeared often as a repeat guest on CNN, Today, NPR, Oprah, and Good Morning America, and has lectured worldwide on humor, gender, power, and troublemaking. She grew up in Brooklyn, but now lives with her husband in Connecticut. We also welcome her in conversation partner, Caroline Leavitt. Caroline is the award-winning and New York Times best-selling author of 12 novels, including Days of Wonder, Is This Tomorrow, With or Without You, and Pictures of You. A book critic for People magazine, her essays, articles, and stories have been included in New York Magazine, Modern Love in the New York Times, Salon, The Daily Beast, and others. She was the recipient of a New York Foundation of the Arts Award for fiction and a Sundance Screenwriters Lab finalist, and recently was named to the long list for the Joyce Carol Oates Literary Prize, a prize that is awarded not in recognition of a single book, but for an author of national consequence whose career is continuing to flourish.
Yay!
Yes.
Yeah.
Caroline is also the co-founder of A Mighty Blaze, an organization of 35 professional creative volunteers connecting writers with readers online since March 2020. So before I leave the screen, uh, please do use that Q&A option or the chat to submit questions about fast, famous women, and we will get right to it. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And thank you, Warwicks. So I'm really thrilled to be here with Gina, who is a friend, and we bonded through all the series of fast fiction. But there's something about this particular one of fast, famous women that is really striking a chord, a major chord. I believe it's now in its third printing or something, or it's like zooming up the charts. Why do you think? I have my own ideas, but why do you think this book is hitting people's, right where it matters in their hearts? It's like people are swamping to this book, and there's the gorgeous cover.
It's a gorgeous cover done by Mary Lasley, who is also one of the contributors to the book. Yeah, Mary Lasley, yeah, who does graphics and has helped with publicity along with our friend Laura Rossi. And it's, and again, Caroline, you're the best literary citizen in the world. And that you understand, though, as I think we all do if we've been around the publishing and writing block for a while, writer's blocks, go in various neighborhoods, but that it's to encourage not only each other, writers who have been engaged in the process of writing, but to make sure that there are spaces and places and pathways and maps for younger people, and especially for younger women who are going to be the heiresses of what we've put out there. They're going to continue not only to read, but they're the ones who are going to write the next stories. And they need to feel the encouragement of the histories that have come before them. And you
Right.
and I, you and I have, we're good at telling our stories. It's like you are one of the people that I love following on Facebook and following on social media because you're honest about the work that you do. You're not one of the writers or just one of the public figures who's always out there talking about how fabulous everything is all the time. It's just, and that's my only worry is sometimes like when a new book comes out, so Fast Famous Women, it's like knock on wood. It seems to be going well. People seem to be buying it. They seem to like it. I want everybody who has a copy, I'm going to shill for the book. It's like, they should go write a review, wherever they can of it to get the word out. That's also part of it. But it is the idea of looking towards other people for inspiration. And I think what everybody's hearing now, the stories that we're telling, they're so often they don't make room for feeling insecure or for feeling like I don't know what I'm doing. When you write things, Caroline, they're I love them. It's like I wrote 3 pages today, and you have the accomplishment, but people think this is a New York Times bestselling author. This is a woman who is a great American author. This is somebody who has a body of work. This is somebody who's taught at universities. This is somebody who teaches writing, but even you have days where you're going, I don't know if what I just wrote was any good, but I did 3 pages. I don't you write about your struggle with the process, and you're not being dramatic about it. You're not being whiny about it. It's just you're doing it like the way everybody else who has a job complains about work. Everybody who works complains about work. I mean, I'm sure that the greatest brain surgeons in, the world are going, if you saw the brain that I had to deal with today, you would have plotzed. I'm sure whoever there must be, whatever anybody does, if you're the produce manager at, a supermarket, there are days when it's great. And there are days, and my lights, I teach at a public university. And if I am not physically moving, my lights will go out. And that's not metaphoric. That's a little too literal. The lights will go out on me if I'm not moving. But you talk about that it's not always easy. And sometimes when we're just talking about, I got a new book out, and here's my, Laura helped me get all of these fabulous gigs, and I'm getting to do this, that we forget, or other people forget, like there were times, I mean, and I don't know if it was true for you when you were starting out.
Oh, sure.
I don't know if I can do this. Maybe I should work in retail. Law school is a possibility. I mean, that there were other things to do. So one of the reasons, going back to your question, so 4 Fast Famous Women, published by Woodhall Press and with amazing contributors in it. Some established, you are there. Jane Smiley writes a hysterical piece. Darian Huji is writing about Joyce Chen. I mean, Molly Peacock and Phyllis Levin write about each other, which is amazing. And Molly Peacock's book, The Widow's Crayon Box, is again been doing beautifully, has really found its own home. Phyllis Levin has a new book of poetry just coming out, I think, next month. But we look to each other for inspiration. And I think right now, in terms of this moment, I think that we're recognizing that we need conversations about reclaiming a sense of confidence that people have done this before. I mean, there were women who have found their way. There was, Sandra Day O'Connor, whatever you thought of, she was a conservative. She came from the conservative side of things. She was appointed by Ronald Reagan, right? But she was the first female Supreme Court judge. And she said, it's good to be first, but the last thing I want to be is last. She wanted to pave the way for other women. Sophia Gabriel writes about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And she writes a very personal story about an assault that she experienced, but feeling like Ginsburg had given her and the laws that she was adamant about keeping in place as long as she could, ones that we've now forfeited or that the government has taken from us, about women's health. They're important. There are women writing about Sotomayor and the fact that she poses with her red nails, and that the Latina community sees that she is not giving up her identity. She may be in those black robes, but she's still doing her red nails. And so it's drawing strength from women who didn't talk about not having it easy, but really didn't have it easy. And, Mother Jones was considered one of the biggest agitators about Shirley Chisholm, about Zora Neale Hurston, women who came out of places where they had to overcome not only a lack of privilege, but an active barrier that told them you can't do this. And I think that we're increasingly hearing a message. You can't, what's the matter with you, honey? You can't do this, or you can't do this anymore. Who did you ever think you were? And these are all stories about who we are, where we came from. And I think that they will encourage us to figure out what we're going to do next.
I want to show you that while you're speaking, I made notes on little post-its. I want to talk about, first of all, I think the importance of this book is that it really generates this profound sense of community, not just with other women now, but we're seeing other women in the past whose shoulders we've stood on. And we're realizing that, we're looking at them through a newer lens, but they're still incredibly inspiring. And the important thing about the title, like, Fast Famous Women, women are not supposed to be famous. Men are. If a man is outspoken, he's strong. If a woman is outspoken, she's a bitch.
Right.
And she needs to be put down. Women are supposed to be polite, nice, good girls. And as you read through this collection, what's so wonderful, Gina, is that these women are not particularly nice, but they're wonderful, and you still want to know them.
Right.
You still want to know them. Can you talk about that? Talk about women in fame and.
Well, it was interesting. It was actually Darian who inspired the collection, who said, "Why don't you do it so that the women that you're asking to write are choosing the women who inspire them?" And I thought, okay, so that triangulates it in an interesting way. So it's almost like we get another set of voices. I mean, with the 4 Fast Women books that I've done with Woodhall, so it's been 5 years, 4 books, and 300 writers. So it's like or 300 pieces. So it's like a lot of moving parts. And but this way, it's like almost adding another layer, because the writers are choosing the other women to write about. And fame, as you said, it's not, women got bad reputations. They didn't get famous, they got a reputation. And the last thing you were supposed to have is a reputation, because a reputation meant that you were in public. And if you were in public, that meant that other people had access to you. And we were always, I was out of this Italian family in Brooklyn, the first girl in my family ever to go to college, or I think to graduate from high school in a timely fashion. It was not what girls were expected to do, because you were supposed to, girls were supposed to get married as soon as possible.
Right.
And stay virgins. Men were supposed to lose their virginity as soon as possible and put off getting married as long as possible, right? Where it was the opposite for women. It's amazing we get along as well as we do, actually, men and women. It's astonishing we can have conversations. And my husband turns 80 tomorrow, so we've had a long conversation going along. And Michael, who is one of the good guys, and he was looking at this book going, "This is good." And I mean, he always approves, but he's like, that's really interesting. This one is writing about this one, and this one is writing about this one, and Temple Grandin is in here. And it's not, it's not just, dancers, or it's not just famous people. It's women who have contributed to history, but it's not a history book. So it's Amelia
Right.
Earhart when she is going to Purdue and she wants to start. It's not the tragic end of Amelia Earhart. It's the idea of her trying to inspire younger women to go into engineering and to take flight, but really to take flight, to see new horizons for themselves. It's about looking at Marilyn Monroe. Amy Harl Sherman writes about Marilyn Monroe, and her pull line is, Marilyn, more people have wanted to be you than you ever wanted to be you.
Right. Right.
You know, and it's so fame can become absolutely poisonous to women if they allow themselves to be formed by this sort of Iron Maiden of public identity that
Yep.
they, as a human being, that they're pushed into, but that they're supposed to be, the spikes are inside an Iron Maiden, right? That it's this device that you're inserted inside of and then destroyed by. And fame can do that for women who are unable to protect themselves from that. But most of the women that we talk about in Fast Fame and Women are the ones who've been able to use it to pass it along to other people. So, I mean, I crib Gloria Steinem's line when she said, are you passing the torch to someone else? And she said, no,
That's
I'm
right.
using it to light all the other torches. I'm holding on to it, but I will light other torches with it. And so that's what I see all the women here. But your image of it, Caroline, I think of it as this is just one great party. It's like
Yeah.
it's like 150 women at a great party, because you have the writers and then you have the women that they're talking about. And, as some of them are, outside on the balcony, smoking whatever they're smoking and, looking at, the skyline, and other ones are sitting in an alcove and it's just the two of them having a quiet conversation. Some are off dancing in another room, other ones are looking at the books on the library, seeing, talking to other women about that. So it's different combinations of that community, but that everybody is in conversation with everybody else. And I think we are feeling, right? I mean, every newspaper every day is the Washington Post, the Atlantic, the New York Times, N1, whatever we're reading, comes up with something about the sense of isolation that we
Yes.
felt, when you started A Mighty Blaze, it was to keep the conversation going when people were at home and isolated, for medical reasons, because of COVID, but to make sure that that conversation keeps going so that we know we're not the only ones. We're
That's
not,
right.
right.
That's absolutely right. I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. It seems to me that a lot of times men don't want women to be together in a community. And it feels like they've set up this myth that women are petty, we're cagey, we want to steal each other's partners. Every woman I know knows that this is not true. We want to help other women. When one woman gets up to go to the ladies' room, we go there too because we want to know that. And I was wondering, like, besides your husband, have you had men, comment on this and realize how incredibly this is like, to me, this book is like sistership.
Ah,
We're all, that's the word I think of, that it is like, yeah, you keep your own torch, but you make sure everybody else
right,
has a torch too.
right.
There's no competitiveness in it because men have been taught that competitiveness is good and women are
Right.
taught it's not.
Mhm.
Talk about that for us.
Sure. No, and I think that the idea, again, the mythology that somehow women
Yeah,
all competitors is something set up so that it's a divide and conquer sort of mentality, and
right.
that for far too long, and I see it. I like to think it's lessening, but I still see it that young, smart, funny, intellectually curious
Right.
women will still say, well, most of my friends are guys. I don't really get along that well with other women. And I'm like, do you want to go talk to the 18 other young women who are saying the same thing to me outside the door? Because they're all saying this, because it's still, I mean, Dorothy Parker wrote about this. It's the idea of being thought of as one of the boys is still a desirable position to be in. And it's confusing because when somebody says you're just like one of the guys, it's like nobody has ever looked at it. No man is, or very few men have looked at the woman, especially in a group. Let's say the tech bros, that the one woman that they have walking into the room that they're thinking of hiring, and they're like, oh yeah, like you just fit in with one of the guys. They're not talking about her the same way when she leaves the room. They're
That's right.
looking at her differently
That's
when she
right.
leaves the room. They're focused on other things. And when I realize when somebody says, "Oh God, you're acting just like a woman," and I say, "Oh, you mean again, I'm being creative, I'm being smart, I'm being insightful, I am being energetic, I am being engaged, I am being empathetic." You know, which parts of that? Do you mean I'm being just like, thank you so much? I'm being just like a woman. That's the highest compliment I can imagine. But for so long, that has not been the way we've seen. We have regarded the feminine, and I think this includes women, the feminine is somehow a diminishment.
That's
And
right.
and that is something that we need actively to not just ignore, but to dismantle and recreate, because it's never been the case. And I think that it's sort of in every generation, it's like the idea of being the ingenue, being the girl who's different from the other girls. And this goes back to Jane Austen novels.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, it
Right.
was always the one sister who is different from all her other sisters. And she's the one that we associate with. She's the one that, you know, we want to be that sister that was liked by the dad, who wasn't like the mom, who wasn't just the one who was going to get married off. We all wanted to be Jo in Little Women. We wanted to be the smart, different one. But to say, but wait a minute, that to be smart or to be interesting or to be kind or to have a sense of humor, does that being different? That means being like other women.
Right. Right. Right.
And so that understanding that there is this community and that in fact, the idea is not to separate yourself from it, but to become part of it and draw strength from it and borrow. It's like, I don't know, it's like a credit union of the spirit or something, where you get to borrow from other people. Like when you're in need of it, you can borrow somebody else's courage. You know, they can lend it to you. They have a little extra today or for now, but they can lend it to you. And then when they need it back, you can credit it to them. But it's not the competition. It is the community. I think you're
It's
absolutely right.
definitely the community. I also want to talk about, it seems that in today's world that women's power is being curtailed by the government. Recently, there was a move to, and I think it's ongoing, I think it's called the Share Act, where if you got married and you changed your name to your husband's name, if you don't have the name that you were born with, then you can't vote. So they are punishing women doubly. And I find that really terrifying. Why do you think that we're so scary still to the powers that be? Why do we have to have all of our powers stripped?
Well, I think that let's go back to the, I mean, for I call it an origin myth, but I mean it is
Right,
a
right.
common story that there was that broad Eve in the Garden of Eden, right? And that's how you know that God is a guy. If there's a God, he's definitely a man. Because I've had people come up, it's like, well, as feminists, don't you believe that God was a woman? I said, absolutely not. Because no female God would have said as the first thing, don't eat something.
That's
First
right.
thing a male God does is put us on a diet. Don't eat the apple. If you had a female God, she would have said, It's an apple. Have it with cheese. You can make a pie. It'll clean your teeth. It's roughage, but in a nice way. It's fiber. Have it with something sweet. Have it with something savory. A male god says, don't eat this. So the woman goes, she's tempted. And then they think, well, if one woman could drive us out of a paradise,
Paradise.
then can you imagine what a bunch of them together could do?
That's
It
right.
only took one woman to drive us out of paradise. So if you put three of them together, let's say in the ladies' room, then they're a coven and they will undo everything. And I also think, not for nothing, but it goes back to the whole idea of capital. And now I'm going to go into my teacher mode, but the idea of capitalism being built on the hymen, on female virginity, because until Maury Povich, you had to take a woman's word for it that the child that she was saying is yours was yours. There wasn't a DNA test. And so women had this incredible power to say, this is your child, but you couldn't test it. So it was like women were always, you can't give them too much power because you can't trust them. And it is, I think we have astonishing power, and that it is overwhelming for I just see Amanda saying God as women would definitely encourage girl dinners. Absolutely.
That's right.
God would encourage us. Oh, there's Renee Townsend. Hello, Renee from Manzanados. That we would be rewarded for being good eaters and good talkers.
That's
And
right.
the two things that girls are still trying to do is keep themselves quiet and keep themselves as undernourished as possible.
Yes.
And that I have kids still who come in and go, I was bad today. And I said, did you sleep with your cousin? What do you mean? I mean,
Right?
yeah, it's like I had
Big
half a
chocolate.
muffin. And I'm like, okay, like if you want to start an interesting conversation by saying I was bad today, you better have something interesting to say.
That's right.
Something you ate is not interesting to say. I mean, unless you're a chef, unless
That's right.
this is not being bad today. You have to come up like I extorted $150 million from. Like that would be interesting, but nobody's come in and told me that story yet. So, but
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I just have one other
please.
question that I want to ask you, which is it has to do with American culture and how women are not allowed to age or be unbeautiful, which was partly why I wanted to write about Fanny Bryce.
Yeah.
Fanny Bryce is like, she was funny, she was kind of odd looking, and I just adored her spirit. I defy anyone not to look at her and think, what a gorgeous, wonderful woman. But in the light of that, we have the Oscars where Demi Moore, in The Substance, portrayed a woman who did everything to stay young, and she lost to another very young actress. And there's like a lot of dialogue going on about that. Why aren't we allowed to age? Why do we insist that we do have to get Botox or whatever else or
Yeah.
to look young? Why isn't old age beautiful? Why doesn't anybody ever say it's your personality that makes you radiate? The rest is just, we're all going to look terrible at 98,
Right.
or we'll look beautiful if we still have great, personalities.
That I think all of that is true. And it's certainly not something men on side, I shouldn't say men don't go through it because I see now that
They
men
do now. They do now.
They do now. And that was the whole idea, again, especially with second wave feminism, was that not that men were going to have to start getting their eyebrows waxed, but that women weren't going to. It wasn't like equality meant that they were going to have to wear matte from Clinique stuff on their faces, is that we weren't going to have to. It was not. So it's like, no, it's not that it was going to even out that way so that you're making yourself miserable. It was that we were all going to stop making ourselves miserable. First of all, the opposite of aging is not looking young. The opposite of aging is death.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the first part. So this is, but when you're talking about, and your piece in Fast Famous Women, which is
Great collection.
the price of like 4 greeting cards. So you could get the nice thing about buying a book for like a gift is you can give it to someone after reading it and say, I had to read it before giving it to you. Like you can't do that with wearing pajamas, right? You have to wear the pajamas first and then give it to you. But a book, people are happy if you give it to them a gift after you read it. But with Fanny Bryce, you did such a beautiful idea because Fanny Bryce was the funny girl. And
Right.
right, to have a sense of humor, I have it in, they used to call me Snow White, but I drifted the first book. I thought it was about gender difference in humor. And it's like, if you said about a friend, if you want to set up your girlfriend with a guy friend, and you said she has a great sense of humor, what
Oh,
it meant she had one eye in the middle of her forehead. It meant that she had to compensate for not having beauty or long legs or a perfect nose or whatever it was. That sense of humor was compensation for something else. And not a wonderful addition and a talent, but that she had to make up for not having something else.
that's right.
And the same thing with intelligent. Oh, she's so smart. Oh, she's so, but
Right.
that because it wasn't beautiful. The first thing that you said that you know, if beauty wasn't the first attribute, but when you said, what your line is it that women who are different looking, right?
Yeah.
You said if women, I asked her, I hesitate here, if she thinks that women who are unusual looking have to be funny to be liked. And you do this interview, right? Wonderful interview where you and Fanny Bryce are talking, and you give Fanny Bryce full voice, which I love. Is that like she said, I'm listening to it and I can hear her talking. But you know, to be the funny girl again
Right.
meant that you weren't the pretty girl,
That's right. That's right.
right?
And why can't you be both or neither or
That's
just
totally
who
correct.
you are?
Right. And but you have her in this interview. I mean, in the piece that you wrote, you give her what would have in her day, and there I'm going dark again, would have been called a moxie, right? That she
Yeah.
has guts, that she has courage.
You
And
want to be with her. You want
right,
to, I would go anywhere with her.
right,
Anywhere with her.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think that that's because it's somebody who brings energy with them and creates it. And that women have often been seen by many cultures. I mean, we're talking about astonishing intersectionality in a sort of misogynistic viewpoint of women, in a diminishing viewpoint of women. And again, putting us on a pedestal is still not letting us be people.
Right.
I think
That's right.
whether you put us, you make a woman be in the gutter or you put her on a pedestal or in a throne, it's still not allowing her to be a full human being, right? She's
That's
bits
right.
and pieces. She's not an integrated human being, and she is not integrated into the community. She's always somehow an exception. And the women in Fast Famous Women, the stories that the writers tell about them all humanize them. And that's one of the great parts, that they're not talking about the ways that, oh, we can never be like them. We can never do that. Oh, it is the ways that they're, Neve Emerson writes about Queen Maeve of Ireland. And she has a great line that's saying, you know, like Empress queens, warrior queens, they're just like us because it's like it makes you feel connected to these women. And it is that sense of personal connection, right, Caroline, that makes us,
It's absolutely a
yeah,
personal connection and honesty too. I
yeah,
mean, I think that if you think about the people who, the women who you love the most, it's the ones who have been through something
right,
and they keep going on and they refuse to give up and they
right,
refuse not to take up space. I mean, it's like I'm reading all these things. There was one woman who said, I forget who it was. Oh, Nina Simone. Whenever
uh-huh.
she had a breakup, she wanted to listen to Nina Simone. And I thought, of course,
No,
because
right,
you
it's
want that.
right. It's Sharon Bailey talking about oh, come on, it's not Nina Simone. It's almost Nina Simone. It's another great blues singer. But it's exactly that was the background to her life. We're talking actually tomorrow night. And it is about, if it's Nina Simone now, I'm going to feel really terrible. It is, I will find it in a second. I can't. Nancy Wilson. Nancy Wilson.
Right.
And she said, whenever I felt a budding romance, a breakup, a new adventure, or one of life's upheavals, only Nancy Wilson can fix it. It's that idea. It's like, but we feel this sense of camaraderie. You said uh, 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 sistership, which I love. Sistership, and that's, you know, it's really, we're all in the same boat. I mean,
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, and that it is the sense of pulling, you know, pulling for each other, and it's, and that's not a refusal to acknowledge that life is tough, but it is the belief that that somebody is not going to be out to get you. Patty Wynne Brown has a nice piece on Patti LaBelle, and where she said that Patti LaBelle sort of pulled her out of the audience at one point at a live concert to have her come up on stage and like dance with her. And where Patti LaBelle said to her, "Don't let anybody put your light out. Don't let anybody
That's
tell you."
right.
And
right.
it is that sense of saying, you know, you can do this. You can, and not necessarily become famous, but that you can be great at what you do, and that's what matters. You can add to the world in a way that will leave a meaningful legacy. And all of these women in this book have left a legacy. The first woman to get a library card, to become a librarian.
I know, it's incredible.
But you think, I've never thought of that as somebody who broke ground. But think of how libraries have affected us in our lives, have changed our lives. And somebody had to be the first one to do that. So Amanda's asking if we have questions from the
Any
audience.
questions?
Or Amanda, you have questions.
Well, Caroline, did you have a last question?
I have actually one other question. One other comment that you can comment on, Gina. I think this whole thing with sistership is, every day I'm inundated with ads that say, here are 10 things women over 50 should not wear, or here are 12 hairstyles women over 60 should not have. I began a few years ago, I made it a point when I was walking around New York to look for older women and compliment them. And it's the most wonderful thing. You see something wearing and you say, oh, I love what you're wearing. And people are so happy, and that makes you so happy. And it's kind of like this connection again, that we're all in this together, no matter what our ages. So I do have a question for you, Gina, which is, what's up next for you?
What's up next for me? I actually have a book coming out in the fall called Gina School. And it is an illustrated volume. It is, I found that one of a former student, now a friend, he draws he draws just like himself, but it's like Edward Gorey. He is a fine pen and ink artist. And so he has illustrated what I consider to be the most important things that I've learned. And he has drawn images. I gave him complete artistic freedom, images to illustrate. So that I think that one of the lines, for example, is the opposite of aging is not staying young. There's not youthfulness, but the opposite of aging is death. And so did a wonderful, creation and illustration that's funny and poignant. And so that's the next one. Somebody asked a good question. Which fast book essay did you like writing best, Caroline? Because you've been in several.
Did I like writing best?
Yeah.
Well, I liked reading best. Of all the three
That
books.
you've done because
Oh,
you're,
you know
yeah.
what? The one that really got me really was the Fanny Bryce one.
Okay.
Because when I started that, I didn't realize that I had been thinking about, I grew up looking really different from everyone in my neighborhood and different in school. I didn't look like any of the girls in high school. I was bullied a lot. And I didn't realize that was the question that I wanted to ask Fanny
Yeah.
Bryce, which was, how did you do that? Like, did you have to be funny? Because I was also getting messages from my mom to like, don't be so loud, be shy. People like boys like quiet girls, people like quiet girls. And in writing that, it was so important to me because I felt like it was healing me just to talk to Fanny Bryce, who was telling me, look whatever way you want, honey. And I
Exactly.
thought, that is great. That is just great.
No, it really no, and I also love because you were in Fast Fallen Women, and Fast Fallen Women, you tell a fabulous story about your let's say your ballet incident. Can
Oh my
I say that?
God. Oh my
That
God. I
that
was
was
20, I was 26, I believe, and then happily married. He was in his 50s and married, and he looked like he was 70. He looked like this little gnome. He had dentures, but he paid me attention. And he lived in a trailer park. So of course I fell in love with him. It was
because you said he was bald with
He was
fake.
like bald and he had dentures and he was just, and I thought he was wonderful because he listened to me. There is something so seductive about somebody who listens to you
Yeah.
and admires you. And I've often wondered what happened to him, but he did. He invited me to his trailer park.
But it's wonderful. It's a brilliant piece. But it also it like, in Fast Fallen Women, there's all these different definitions of fallen. But in Famous, then you are right at the beginning of the book, and it's just so wonderful. And that you have it ends with you saying, I've got an idea, let's sneak out the back away from the glare of people thinking they know us, but you and me will know,
That's right.
it says.
Yeah, it was so meaningful and important to me. It sort
Yeah.
of like underlined everything that I try to do every day, which is just, don't compare yourself to others, don't try to be like other people, just be yourself.
Well, what's
That's
the
your
old
gift.
what the old Yiddish expression? If you're trying to be somebody else, who's going to be you?
Oh, I love that. I
Right?
didn't know that
Oh
expression.
yeah, oh that's a great one. I love that one because and that's real. I think that that's also really crucial. It's like this is, you're not going to fit into some other version. This is your design,
You have another question from
Mhm.
Donna Johnson, Gina.
Ah,
Who are some
okay.
of the women who have inspired you or changed your life?
Oh, let's see. Thank you, Karen. You know, my teachers inspired me and changed my lives. And I've written about them. My elementary school teacher, Mrs. Pruitt, was my mother was now I think we would say, she was clinically depressed or bipolar. She was sad. She grieved a lot of her life. She was French Canadian. She raised her children not in her mother tongue. I think and my, uh, a little sort of Grace Paley-ish. I was sort of raised to entertain her. I learned how to tell stories to sort of bringing back a kill. I would sort of like, oh, this happened today or this happened today. So it would sort of, I would try to make her laugh or feel more engaged. But I write about, in Fast Famous Women, I write an essay about Faye Weldon, who was a novelist. Actually, the last piece Faye wrote that was published was in my first collection, Fast Famous Women. But she, I discovered her when I was living in England. She was a very popular novelist. And when I started doing my dissertation, I actually wrote to her care of her publishers, never expecting to hear back. And I wrote and said, dear Ms. Weldon, I'm going to write in part on your work for my PhD. And I said, this does not mean I'm going to dig up your garden to look for manuscripts. I just wanted to make you aware of it. it did not expect, I just put it out in the universe. And 2 weeks later, this was in the 80s when there was still airmail, when people wrote each other letters. And she wrote back, I still have it in the crinkly onion skin paper, the cheap paper that we use for airmail. And it said, Dear Gina Barreca, handwritten, Dear Gina Barreca, by all means, dig up the garden. You shall keep them, you can keep the manuscripts, we shall plant bulbs.
Oh,
And I was like, oh, I mean, it changed, it literally changed my life. So that first of all, the idea that a writer was a real person, right? Like was a human being. And I encourage my students or people that I know who admire writers to write to them, to say, send a note, go on Facebook, send a letter, do their publishers, say thank you for your writing. Thank you for what you put out there. I carry your book with me. I'm reading it now. It makes such a big deal. It also, Faye inspired me to make sure that I answer every piece of mail that I get. Even if it's to say, well, isn't it a remarkable country that we live in where you and I can both feel like we can stand, at least so far, under one flag and both call ourselves American. That's my father fought in World War II so that we would have freedom of speech to be able to disagree. But I write back to everybody who writes to me, unless they're threatening, in which case I bring the letter to the police. And then, but Faye also helped me understand that writing was a job and that you no more waited to be inspired to do your job than if you were working retail.
right.
Like, when I worked at Bloomingdale's, I did not need to be inspired to sell tops. It wasn't like, are you inspired to sell a striped blouse today? Like I am working, I am getting paid minimum wage and commission, and I better sell this blouse today. And so that, figuring out but that was a blessing
Mhm.
to not see it as something that was out there in the universe that would either touch its little fairy dust wings on me or not, but that I had to do. I had to show up and write if I was going to be a writer. So that was a really good lesson.
We're coming to the end of our time, but we got a flurry of a few more questions. Do you want to try to do like a lightning round real quick?
Okay, sure. Everyone,
Okay. Um,
how
who
do
do you
we
look to? Go ahead.
no, I was just going to look at,
Oh
um,
yeah.
sorry, how do we continue to
I
build
can.
this? Oh, sorry, go ahead. You tell me.
So who do you look to for writing inspiration and book ideas since you have published so many books yourself as an author and editor?
I have a series of books that I keep over my computer at home. Caroline is right there. I have contemporary authors. Jane Smiley is right there. Some of the writers are in. I'm lucky enough that some of the writers are actually in the books that I have. But I keep Dorothy Parker. If I can't write, I go start a conversation with Dorothy Parker. Mimi Pond, who is in the book. Mimi Pond is somebody who's a graphic novelist. She's got a new book coming out on the Mitford sisters, which is going to be astonishing, is going to be great. I'm actually looking at the books I have. Henry James. He
I
doesn't
love
actually.
Henry James.
Okay, good. He doesn't fit with the profile of these other smart,
I
funny,
know, I
but
know.
the writing is, you can just pick up a
Yeah,
James novel or a Thomas Hardy novel.
I love
And,
Thomas Hardy.
yeah, and read them, and just, I mean, literally anywhere in the book, you can start with them. Margaret Atwood. I will read Atwood at different places. I will often read, I teach her novels, but I find her nonfiction really inspiring. And also I do not consider myself erudite in terms of poetry, really, but Atwood's poems really get me. So those are right there. The other ones that I'm looking at right on my shelf right now, I find there are funny writers who I look to. So Dave Barry was somebody who still makes me laugh all the time. David Sedaris. Maybe it's just being named David. I don't know. George Orwell is somebody who will sometimes, I need him to, it's like getting an electric shock. And it's not 1984, it's not Animal Farm. It's a book about a writer. It's a minor novel, but it's called Keep the Aspidistra Flying. And it's about this guy who wants to write, and he's a terrible writer, but he is a great writer of advertising copy, and he can't stand it. And so it's this real struggle. There's George Gissin's New Grub Street, which is another, I think everybody who wants to write should have to read New Grub Street. It will not make them happy, but it's really something that they should have to read. Looking at the other books, I mean, Toni Morrison, I mean, I'm teaching Beloved, but I've never taught Beloved as a horror story before. And I realized that I've been teaching it wrong I've taught it as a feminist novel, as American history, as the haunting of enslaved peoples, by American history that erases them, all of that as just a horror novel. That is how it has to be read. I mean, it is to pair with Rosemary's Baby. It's fabulous. So, I mean, these are the books that I pick up, and I can read a paragraph and it'll get me started. So I'll go back to Orwell's Such Were the Joys, about the atrocities. You talk about bullying, the atrocities committed on him as a child in his school, private school, where he was the poorest kid in the private school, which is the worst possible thing that you can be. And I know them by heart, but every time I come to them, I come away with something new. How about you, Caroline? What do you?
Oh, everything. Well, I read you, of course. I read I love Elizabeth Strout. I love Julia Phillips, who wrote Bear. I love Charles Dickens because he just knows how to move a story like nobody's business. And also, like you said, Thomas Hart. I love the Bronte sisters.
Oh, sure, of course.
Just great, great.
Yeah, and you're right, because all of them do. They made one page move into another.
Rinse the other.
And there are a lot of people you could compare other people's versions of what they've done, but nobody does it the way that. And with Dickens,
I know Dickens is just
or Thackeray. For when I need a real kick for a female figure, I go back to Becky Sharp. Becky Sharp is like the original bad girl in Vanity Fair. And that's the other thing. I mean, I tell everybody who wants to write, and my students repeat it back to me. I said, if you don't have time to read, you don't have time to write.
That's right. You have to read. You have to read.
That's the only thing you could do. It is part of the discipline. It is not something that you can ignore.
I think this last question, I think, is very important. Donna says, such an empowering conversation. How can we continue to build this sisterhood in a world trying to set us back in time?
Gina?
Yeah, I think that it is to make sure that our voices are continue to be loud, unacceptable, when necessary, uncivil, where it doesn't fit into. I mean, civility, one thing, but where it's not just where you're not worried if somebody's feelings are going to get hurt. If somebody has their boot on your neck, you can't be thinking, oh, if I move my neck, I might hurt them.
No.
Okay? We need to make sure we get the boots off our necks. We need to call somebody out when something is dreadfully wrong. We need to do it in public. We need to do it together.
Right.
The collective voices make an echo. And especially, again, when we can have, I'll hold the book one more time, but when we can see it happening through time, and to realize that rights, women's rights, any kind of rights, the rights that have not been inherited for 10,000 years are not going to remain in place unless we fight for them. We
Mhm.
cannot think of them as, well, this is precedent that's set, so now we can imagine this will keep happening. The fight for them goes on every day, and every time we open our mouths, every time a woman opens her mouth and something besides a cooing noise comes out, it's a feminist gesture, right? And every time a
Yes.
woman laughs, it's a feminist gesture. Every time a woman writes something besides a laundry list, it's a feminist gesture. So every time we do something, even on a day we feel like we haven't done much, you get up, you take a shower, you get into the world, you show up, your presence, you have a conversation with somebody else, you have made your voice heard in the world.
Hmm.
It counts.
It
Thank
does count.
you. One last quick thing, since a lot of people are making social media moves these days, what are your preferred ways to communicate with folks on the socials if you do that? Both of
Uh,
you.
I really like Facebook, and I answer it, and I know how to do that. I'm not really good at the other parts. I'm sort of learning how to do Instagram, but I'm not really good at it. But Facebook, I have a public and a private Facebook, but I answer those, and I have a website that's ginabarreca.com, but I answer it because of Faye Weldon. I answer my emails.
I love
So
that.
they can go through the website or just send it to Regina Barreca at UConn.edu, which is UCO and then not UConn like in Alaska, but UConn as in the University of Connecticut. So, and I might take a bit, but I answer everybody.
Thank you. Caroline?
I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Threads. I'm on TikTok. I'm just not on X. I refuse to call it X, Twitter. I'm not on that.
Excellent.
Fair enough.
Thank you both so much. This
Amanda.
was
So
equal parts unsettling and inspiring. I didn't know that Maury Povich did so much to dismantle women's power. And I
Well, it's just
also,
the DNA test, but
well, that's hot. And I also need to re-examine the way I think about Austen heroines and why I enjoy them so much. So thank you both. Thank you
thank
to
thank
you.
you
everybody
so
who
much,
joined us.
Amanda. Thank you,
Yeah,
everybody. Buy books from Warwick's.
Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely. Thank you.
Thank
Bye. Good
you.
night.
Bye.
Bye.